looks like my random picking of music out of the free YouTube audio library paid off that time because Nick Allen, you're a rock star, buddy, and that was some intense music there.
It's good to be here. What's up, man?
So, ladies and gents, and folks of all other persuasions, welcome to SpyCam. This is our weekly show where we take a look behind the esports industry, bring on those folks that you may see doing cool stuff in esports, and talk to them a bit about what the heck it is they do in esports, and maybe it's something someday that you could be doing too. I know from our perspective over at Splyce, we're always looking for the next great employee who's going to make our company more awesome, and knowing the history of Twitch, I'm sure that's a thing for you as well, Nick, yeah?
100%. Yep, that's correct. Always looking for the best and brightest. Yeah, so absolutely.
Yeah, it's a constant struggle in a way where you're presented with a million new people who want the job every day, but you've got to find the right ones who fit. So, for those that don't know, SpyCam, afterwards we'll have a VOD up on YouTube. We have all the previous VODs up there as well, where we've spoken to many insiders throughout the industry. Today I'm joined by none other than Nick Allen for the next chapter in that YouTube saga. Nick, previous of Riot Games, now with Twitch for we've about approaching a year now.
8 months about.
8 months,
Yeah,
okay.
it's going really fast. Yeah,
It's amazing how fast esports moves, isn't it?
yeah, it's true. Yeah, we always talk about it's like how long you been in gaming or how long you been in esports. 2 years. Well, in like gaming years, that's like 20 years. It's like it's like dog years. Just it goes so fast. But I'm sure you can relate too, man.
I love when people ask me, like, what are your projections for 2017, 18, and 19? I go, 19? Well, we do in a month in esports is what other industries do in 5 years. I barely know what's going on next week, so give me a break here. Um, Nick's been with Twitch for about 8 months now. We jokingly said, "What is your title, Nick?" Because if you go to his LinkedIn profile, it does say Director of Strategies and Dank Memes. Which, knowing Twitch, I don't doubt he does some dank meming over there. But why don't you share a little more of like what you do at Twitch and how does a place like Twitch, where outside of building a tech platform where there are obviously coders and people like that, how do the rest of you guys fit in the landscape?
Yeah. So my official title, unfortunately, is not strategies and dank memes as much as I wish it could be. Actually, I should just get business cards with that on there. I think I can probably pull that off.
Dude, in esports, you can pull off anything.
You pull off anything. My official title is Director of Operations for the esports department at Twitch. And so, yeah, many people look at Twitch as a platform, as a tech company. I think to a certain extent, we're a tech firm in the sense that we're doing so much engineering work on the platform itself and all the different features and things that we're creating. But there's a side of it where, we're trying to better business as a whole. And I think one piece of that is esports. Basically, what was happening were a lot of publishers, developers who I tend to work with most in this in my role were coming to Twitch and asking like, "Hey, how do we evolve or enhance our esport? How do we start off on the right foot? How do we do this the right way? Twitch, you seem to be intimately involved in this thing with a good sense of like how to make sure something can be successful, especially on Twitch." And for a while we were pointing people, Twitch, this is before I got there, pointing people to different organizations in the space, and realizing that still the best decisions weren't being made. And
In
some of the
esports,
things,
I don't believe that. I'm sorry.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it tends to happen. And I think that just comes out with like lack of experience or misaligned incentives. And what I mean by that is Twitch is uniquely in a position where if a game grows in esports, it's going to likely, very, very, very likely grow on Twitch, right? So Twitch is incentivized to build an esports department and help people make good decisions around esports by creating healthy, long-standing ecosystems around the games that they're making.
Right.
And a healthy ecosystem is, it's teams and it's players, but it's also like tournament organizers. It's also streamers and content creators. And it's viewers, right? And it's fans. So there's like this huge ecosystem. It's super important to stimulate and grow. And again, it's not just about like that top level competition. So that's sort of what I do at Twitch is I work with publishers and developers to help them make good decisions around esports. hopefully with the mindset being that they're going to grow and they're going to grow on Twitch, and that's good for us too.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought something up that I always think about when you say publishers and you talk about people asking questions. I had looks super good for our awesome office internet, huh? We're an internet-based company, and our office internet just straight up failed me right there. So
Technology age, man.
it is though, right? Like we're talking about things like team houses for our teams and stuff, and we go, can it support a gaming house because do they have enough internet, right? That actually matters. So location is no longer just is it hip and does it have cool stuff. So I don't know what you heard of my question though, Nick. The thing that I was going to bring back up is that you talk about publishers, and I was talking about In Control being on the last show, and we talked about how he consults and stuff for people sometimes and talks about, oh, we want to do an event. We hear about this esports thing. There's a lot of scary stuff on that side too, and then there's the in between too. Of I think like some of it's just a waste. You get publishers who go, we need to make our game an esports game, and I'm guessing you get a bunch of those, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the thing is really, esports as a term it's almost like a brand or a construct, right? Really, like, you can't call something an esport. The community is, if the community is competitive and strives for like top level play, it'll form itself into an esport, right?
Right.
So when you say that when companies come out like we're designing an esport, it's like, no, actually, you're designing a competitive game, and your community is going to decide if it's an esport or not. That's not a title that you get to just kind of place on. It's not like a stamp of something that you can put on there, right?
Right.
And yeah, so a lot of developers come out and they're like, oh man, I saw this thing at Madison Square Garden. How do I get in on that? Like, how do I get something?
They really say that kind of stuff to you?
Yeah, all the time. It's like, well, you should, let's pull back. Let's talk about it. What are you trying to achieve? Why do you want to be there? And in 95% of the cases, probably more than that, 99, it's not worth it for them to do it.
Right.
So part of my job is kind of reeling them back a little bit and be like, hey, you don't need to go that big. You can do it a little bit more conservatively and still have a really massive effect.
You don't have to have Gaming Paradise on your first time out, right?
Yeah.
Something as awesome as Gaming Paradise, Kappa.
Yeah, you can get there, and you can get there, but you have to set up good infrastructure, good systems, and really, listen to the community to be able to get there and achieve that one day.
It's funny, like your question or that comment relates right back to what Poning Pete was asking in chat, related but unrelated. He said, I want to become pro. What are some suggestions on how to get to the next level? And I think that it's interesting as people see LCS or they see our team at the major, stuff like that, and go, I want to do that. And that's not the first thing. The first thing is, how do I get into a main team, right? Or how do I just start pugging with people that get me recognized? There's a logical progression of whether it's producing an event or making your game an esport or whatever, right?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think this exact question is a very recurring problem in the space, in the sense of like a lot of depending on what game people play, and it looks like he wants to be a player, right? Depending on what they're playing, it isn't clear how you become a very top level player.
Right, you don't go to college and get a scholarship.
Right. Like if you think about the NFL, or you have Pee Wee football, and then you have high school, then you have college, and like that trajectory is very, very clear for people.
Yeah.
And not many games out there have a clear trajectory like that. So if you think of League of Legends, you get to the top of ranked, then you get pulled into Challenger, and you like qualify up. So there is a semblance of that. But like CS:GO, like a lot of these guys are like, they top frag in a couple games, they get noticed by some pro players, they get invited to play on a team, and then they get on like a bad team and they work their way up. That's like it's like random in the sense of like how you get up to the top.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think that your game, of being a Smash fan like you are, is probably the easiest one, right? Where it's literally like show up and play, and if you beat people, you move up the ladder. There's almost no game that's like that though, besides the fighting game community.
Street Fighter, like the fighting game community is, is built around these open tournaments, but very much a minority. And so one of the things that I do at my job is help consult, again, going back to developers, thinking about how do you make that clear path up so that if people want to strive and be at the very top, they know exactly what they need to do at this like foundational level and slowly work their way up to the top, which again, like is relatively hard to navigate in a lot of different games.
Yeah, and I think that you know, I'll push back to somebody I'll pick on a little bit. Infinite Crisis. So anybody that remembers that game, 2-3 years ago, PAX East, they had this big esports show, and they were like, "Look, we are esports. You know, we esports now," as people joke.
Yeah.
And it was like, the game's not even out yet. Like, no one's even played it. How do you know you're an esport? There haven't been any community tournaments. Like, no one's really pushing for this to be a thing. And I'm kind of an outspoken person about Heroes of the Storm, for example. Like, I love Blizzard. I'm a Blizzard fanboy, so I'm allowed to say this. I don't think Heroes of the Storm is going to succeed. I just don't. And it's because all I see is it's all Blizzard, all Blizzard, all Blizzard. And I'm like, where's the fans pushing this to be an esport? And if you look at almost every other successful esport, it was either entirely fans or heavily you saw the fans pushing from their side to say, we want this to be an esport. And hey, I'd be happy to be wrong. I really would. I really would love to see these games succeed in spite of that.
Yeah, I mean, like, what is success in those cases, right? Like,
True,
like
true.
if Heroes of the Storm always has around 10K like average concurrence, for example, is that success? Maybe. I don't know. It depends how you define it. You know, I think for a lot of fans and a lot of like emerging titles, 10K viewership. You know, these games would love to have the viewership that Heroes of the Storm has. But
Fair enough.
To your point, like, would Heroes of the Storm ever grow to the level of, you know, League of Legends, Counter-Strike, Dota, something like that, which I think most people would consider to be like the top like successful esports? I would say probably not. But there is a lot of different, you know, varying levels in there too. And I think, you know, at Twitch, like all these different scales of tournaments and different games of different scales, it's all good for us. So
Right.
We always try to think about how, you know, how to sort of spin the perception of like these smaller events, how to make them, you know, look more successful, how they, or maybe like sort of explain why they're successful. In the case of like 10K, that's really good. Like personal streamers don't ever, you know, there's only a few that are getting over 10K. So
Oh God, yeah.
I can kind of go up and, you know, it's there's diversity.
I don't disagree with you there, because like I think that's really important for, let's say, local Smash event, or I'll use Base Trade TV. I think they're a great example, right? Like I think I don't know their story completely, but it looks like a couple people put together this channel, started putting on StarCraft events. That's awesome. GCD TV does the same thing for Warcraft. Those numbers you're talking about, you're right, is awesome. I'm talking the difference, I guess, between a publisher. World of Tanks has done it. Here's the Storm. You saw it with Infinite Crisis. That was the biggest failure. I mean, these other guys haven't had that level of failure. But this idea that we can make something in esport by just dumping loads of money into it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think Infinite Crisis, unfortunately, and I know a lot of the people that were working on that game, and actually the director of esports around Infinite Crisis now works at Turner, running E-League. Her name is Christina Alejandra.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. So, yeah, small world.
Right.
But I would say that, they came out of the gate and put a lot towards the top level competition. They worked on getting former professional players from other games to come and play Infinite Crisis, competitively, and didn't build out that foundational level that's so important. I think there's a couple other examples too. Shoot Mania is one. That back in the day, they put a bunch of money into top level competition as sort of a marketing effort. So people come in, they take all the money, and then they get out, right? They're not like they're long-standing players of that particular game. So yeah, there are a lot of examples of this, and there's a lot of and my job specifically is to get developers and publishers to move away from that sort of mindset of like, let's just do this top level fancy competition.
Yeah, and I will also kind of just throw in there, far be it for me to be the expert on this, right? Like, I'll call myself an expert on theater, film, and television, but I've only been in esports a few years, so just obviously my opinion, not necessarily the answer.
You got a good thing going on, man. I like your opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are like afraid to say like, oh, that one. My favorite question is, when are you going to get an Overwatch team, and when are you going to get a Rocket League team? And I'm like, am I supposed to have a Rocket League and Overwatch team? I didn't know anyone. No one told me that, right?
Yeah. Only get a team in those games if it makes sense. I think there's some like early adopters who are trying to get in early to try to like you kind of beat the curve, but a lot of times people are getting in for the wrong reasons. So make sure the ROI is there, especially like as a newly formed team as yourself, like you should, there needs to be some strong ROI.
I mean, we've looked at games, I won't say which, where we really liked the game, we really liked the teams, we really liked a lot of things, and went, well, it's not right for us right now to even get a team or this particular type of team. So even when it's good, we don't necessarily do it. So, Hey, kind of jumping back, one of the things that we didn't touch on early on is not everyone knows who Nick Allen is. How did all
Oh,
of us have had our illustrious stories of I come from theater, who thought I'd be in esports, right?
yeah.
How did you end up here today?
Good question. So before my walk in the esports world, I was a high school counselor. Um,
No way.
yeah, in my like mid 20s.
Love it.
So I actually got a degree in social work, and then I was going for my master's and doing like high school guidance counseling, mostly around like college education and like some behavioral stuff. But this was back in Sacramento. Um, and I was playing a ton of video games back then, and I actually used to run Smash Brothers tournaments for some of the local people from Sacramento, and also a lot of my friends. And so I was always into games. I just never thought. I don't know. I lived in the world where I thought the only job in video games was to be like a programmer or like an
Right?
engineer. Like I was just super naive to the fact that like people need HR people, and like they need lawyers, and they need business development, and they need operations, and they need event management. They need all these different things.
Yep.
And it never occurred to me like, hey, maybe I could do something like that until one night. um so I was one semester away from getting my master's degree in social work. So I'm like up night late at night, I'm watching Korean StarCraft, and I'm working on my thesis. uh and
That's literally me. My master's degree though is Warcraft though, just so you know, like
Oh
exact
really?
same thing. Yeah, watching late Warcraft,
Very
textbook open. I had a
well.
kid on my lap even at the time,
Oh
so
wow, that's no experiment. Yeah, I mean, I just was trying to entertain myself through like research, and it just wasn't a great situation. But I saw a job opening, or like a request, a job opening for the IGN Pro League, basically on Reddit, like the StarCraft Reddit, like deep in, like not a lot of upvotes. And for some reason, I decided to like, it was like 2 in the morning at this point, watching Korean StarCraft. I was like, I'll put a resume together, and I'll do a cover letter, and I'll just send it in
so
and
you
see.
made the resume right there and then.
Oh yeah, well I had like a social work resume, but I had to like think, okay, so the job opening was for operate like tournament operations, which was like, so they wanted someone to come in part time on the weekends in San Francisco. So it was like Sacramento and San Francisco are about an hour and a half away. To come in on the weekends and run tournaments for StarCraft.
No kidding.
Um, yeah, so I was like, okay, well, I could use a weekend job. Like this could be cool. I know I could run a bracket. This seems
Are you
easy.
saying social work isn't high paying? Because I don't know if I buy that. So.
It's super exactly high paying, but yeah. So, and I was like, hey, a weekend gig too, doing like tournaments and stuff. And I love StarCraft. I'm watching it every week, every night. Like I'm staying up super late to watch the Korean stuff. So I applied, and I created a cover letter, and I made my cover letter basically like, hey, I am the best tournament operator that you could ever find, because as a social worker, right, like I'm practicing like mediation and problem resolution, and like counseling and all these things. So if there's problems, like I can handle it, like I know how to do it. And so I sent it in with my resume, and I didn't hear anything. And then like a month later, they sent me an email like, hey, we're interested in interviewing. And I was like, oh gosh. And they said, except it's not a full-time, or it's not a weekend position, it's a full-time position.
Had you forgotten about it at this point?
I knew there was no way it was going to happen. Like I was like, like esports jobs, this was middle of 2011. Esports jobs, there's like 10 of them, like
Right.
there's not a whole lot of esports jobs in the world at that point. So, so I went in, I did an interview. I was freaking out, like holy crap, and I go back, and I'm having the conversation with my wife. I'm like, hey, like this is a thing, like she's like, oh, whatever, you're not gonna get the job. I was like, you're probably right. So I go in,
Real
and
supportive, right?
and I interview, and I did not get the job.
Oh.
This is no joke. I actually brag a little bit. This is the only job I've ever been turned down for in my entire life, was this job. And they gave the job to Frank Fields, Riot Mirhi.
No way.
Who is the editor for, well, he's no longer at Riot, but he was there for a while. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
And
So
so
Riot eventually eats everybody, apparently, huh?
yeah, exactly. So he got the gig. Super interesting. And I was like, all right, well then that was my one shot. I'm going back to my social work life. So I'm doing social work, doing my thing. 2 months later, I get hit up, by a guy named Colin Zhu. who was starting. He wanted to create a League of Legends division at IGN Pro League because he played League and there's some big opportunities, and Riot at the time was like supporting tournament organizers like with prize money and stuff, and so and he needed a tournament operator, and he's like, but we're not going to need this for a while, so how about you come out to Atlantic City and help us with IPL 3 as a volunteer, and if you do a good job we can talk more or whatever. So I was like, okay. So I went out to IPL 3 and helped run the open side of the StarCraft 2 bracket, which was like 500 players or something like that.
Jeez.
And IPL 3 was an insanely great tournament. And
your Smash background set you up for that one, huh?
Yeah. Since this show is about like people watching and trying to get into the esports industry, my recommendation and what I did was I was literally the first one there every morning and the last one out every night for the entire week I was there. So I would get up at like 5 a.m. I would get ready. I'd get there at like 5:30 or 6. I would work all day, and then I would go out and network with people at night, at the bar drinking, and I'd be out until like 1 or 2 in the morning. And then I would do it all over again. I did this for like a week straight. So basically over the course of a week, I'm at like, 12, 15 hours of sleep. But those connections and like sort of like the willingness that I showed to work really like it stuck with the IPL guys, so much so that when I got back home after IPL 3, they offered me a full-time job to come run League of Legends tournaments for them at the IGN Pro League starting at the beginning of 2012. And that's how I got in. Because Colin Zhu, I noticed, one of the things we talked about before is like who gave you the break.
Yep.
Colin Zhu, who is now, he's at NetEase right now, and his wife actually works at Twitch, coincidentally.
Oh, no kidding.
He gave me my break, and it was a result of me, I think, really just working really hard at these live events, and trying to prove myself. And that's how I got in. So IGN Pro League, did that for about a year, ran IPL 4, IPL 5, was the League of Legends, got promoted to League of Legends division manager, so I ran all of League of Legends. And then from there, IPL got bought by Blizzard, but instead of going to Blizzard, Riot offered me a really sweet job to come run the LCS. And so I went and did that.
It's amazing. I'm going to butt in for a second because your story, I have a similar kind of parallel story that I think is really important for people looking to get in the industry. Is I was with a company a couple years back doing some tournament organization, like production studio full on, like we were going to be a big thing, etc. And I was running the tournaments division, and we went to PAX East. It was the one that Infinite Crisis was at. That's why I was at that specific one. And I knew nobody in esports, right? I'd done 10 years entertainment, but I knew nobody. And I remember being at PAX East and getting to meet all the Twitch people, right? I'm meeting people like KBMOD John, and I'm meeting Vic the Slick, and all these people who are now like up in higher areas of Twitch, because this is 3 years ago when they were all on the ground floor, and it was like 3:30 in the morning at the hotel, whatever hotel is PAX's hotel, and we're at the bar. I'm half drunk. I'm exhausted. I literally started walking the PAX East floor when it opened, and we didn't leave till it closed because we were going to find sponsors. And we worked that floor for 10 or 11 hours or something like that. Like, I was dead tired. And at the end of the day, the last thing I wanted to do was sit there and talk to these guys. They were cool guys, but I wanted to go to sleep, right? Yeah. But I spent that time doing that. And then 2 or 3 years later, I'm starting this company. And I remember being like, I need an in at Twitch. And literally at the time, all I did was like, wait a minute. I bet I have Vic's card somewhere. And I find Vic's card. I send Vic an email. He's over in Japan or something at the time. So he sends me a response at like 5 in the morning or something. It's like, Marty, oh my God, I haven't heard from you in ages. Yeah, let me hook you up. And he sends me over to the right person. And that was the start of our, our relationship with Twitch. And it's like, a lot of times you get lost in the white noise of any company. Like even we're gonna be a year old in 2 days at Splyce. It's the 6th of our anniversary, and even in a year, I already see how there's so many emails that I'm like, I can't answer this. I just gotta delete it. I don't have the time to reply back and say no, thank you, even, right? Yeah. So I think the networking point you're talking about, that willingness to say, A, I'm going to work really hard, but B, I'm just going to, when I don't want to, know that I've got to go to that one stupid party, or I've got to stand around and listen to someone's terrible stories, or whatever it is. So at the end of that time, they're like, wow, that guy's pretty cool. I might want to work with him someday.
Yeah, the way that I think about it is everyone you meet and everyone that tries to add you on LinkedIn or anything could someday be your boss, right?
Right.
And especially with how small the gaming and esports industries are, like you don't know where people are going to end up. And so you should just build connections with everybody as much as you can, right? Like I think timeliness is always a challenge. But going that extra mile to like build that connection and spend some time and be present in the conversations just goes a long way. And it's helped me be successful, long term, working in this space.
Yeah, yep. It's like hadn't thought of it in such succinct terms as that, as like everyone you're connected to could be your boss, but it's a great way to look at it. I just look at it as being a pro team, being a web platform that has infinite potential partners, right?
Yep.
That I like anybody I talk to could be the key to the next stage of growth for us, right?
Yep.
Are they
Absolutely.
going to break into a new product that if we were tied to them early enough that we come along for the ride with them?
Yep.
Are they going to get into a game and then we get into that game, and now we have an ally. Like, I mean, I have allies of other high level teams at this point. Where, look, we weren't a TSM, Cloud9, Dignitas, any of those teams when we started, right? We were like everyone else. We were just any old pro team. But what started to differentiate us is having those allies that could make us introductions to the right people and stuff. And that was, like you said, is knowing that I don't piss anybody off out there. Let's be honest, right?
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. Yep.
All right, so you already answered one of my questions, like what's a best piece of advice? We've already given a few. So let's talk about more about the industry as a whole a little bit. So
Sure.
we're looking at esports. I think it's funny because a year ago when I was pitching esports, when I entered the business plan competition, versus now when I have to talk a little bit about what esports is doing, it's astronomically different than what we thought a year ago, right?
Right.
The growth is bigger than anyone could have ever expected. We joked about ESPN getting in the space and things like that, and now it's like ESPN and Yahoo and MSN, and you know what I mean. So, how do you feel about the growth, its trajectory? I mean, the overall ecosystem right now, especially because you work for a company that has such an important part of its success.
Yeah. I think so I've been doing esports, in the big scheme of things, esports has been around 15, 20 years. I've been doing it for about 5 years, which is not even that long, to be
Right.
perfectly honest, in the big scheme of things. But, every year we would say, like, this is the year. Like, this is the year that a ton of money is going to come in, and a ton of exposure. And this is the year that esports are going to break out. Said this back in 2011, all the way back to where we are now. And actually this year is pretty sure this is the year. Like we always said it kind of kiddingly, but like this year, the amount of venture capital, the amount of attention, the amount of like Newzoo reports, the amount of celebrities, the amount of investors, all these things coming into the space, this is the year that money is going to be around.
Yeah.
And money can have an interesting effect on an industry as a whole. Like I would say esports for the most part up to this point has been an industry of passion, not an industry of like making tons of money and profit.
It's literally just like theater. That's what it was.
Yeah.
You go into
Yeah,
theater because you're just a diehard theater fan, not because you'll ever make a living at it.
Yeah. And I think this is, it's changed quite a bit. So I guess like the industry, I remember IPL 5, which some consider to be one of the better tournaments ever that we ran. We hit 200,000 concurrent viewers on our stream. And literally this was never heard of. I think we broke the record at that point. This is for League of Legends. And literally we're partying, like, everyone was congratulating us, getting personal emails from like the CEO, like all kinds of stuff. Like it was nuts. We look at the major last night or this past weekend, and they're hitting what 500, 600K concurrents. And this is a common occurrence.
Wait, hold on. Let's make it real honest here. We're talking GoTV alone had over 1 million concurrents.
Okay, so
probably
exactly.
2 million plus once you get across Polish, Russian, Portuguese.
Okay.
I mean, it was crazy numbers.
So like the numbers were like the big area, the eyeballs, right? The eyeballs was where we saw a ton of growth in the past like 3 years, and now it's money. Money is coming in. Shaq is invested in teams.
Oh man, that's so amazing. Yeah. I love Shaq.
Yeah. So I mean, we've made it, boys. Like, so I think that's where the industry, where it's going to be feeling the most, I guess, like pressure or change or evolution, however you want to position it.
Right.
In the next like 6 to 12 months is like, what happens when all this venture capital, all this money comes in, and is with any investment, you need to have revenue that supports the investments that you're making.
Yep.
Right. So now we're really going to figure out like, hey, we have all this money in the space. Are the sponsorships, is the merchandising, is all these revenue channels going to be enough to sustain and sort of supplement the investments that are coming in?
Yeah.
And this is the big question for the next year.
Well, and the thing people don't talk to in relation to what you just said, Nick, is you guys, I'll use Twitch as an example because we happen to be talking to you. You guys don't have to pay exclusivity on the NFL like CBS or NBC does, right? Or if you do, I don't know your business model, you're certainly not paying it on the level they are, right? Where a contract for the NFL is in the billions of dollars. And we all, for those of you who don't know, you can go to the Green Bay Packers, they're a public company, and you can see how much money they make. And it's like, I think it's 52% of all of their revenue is solely broadcast rights and revenue sharing, right? So that there's all these pieces to the puzzle of things like, can they support the ecosystem, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I don't know how to define what a bubble is when people call about like the tech bubble or like, you know, the startup bubble or the esports bubble, but generally it's that there is a larger evaluation around the things in the space and what they're actually worth. And eventually it gets to a point where the revenue isn't coming in and that, you know, everyone's backing out. I'm not saying that's where we're at, but that is a concern, right? Now, with more eyeballs, which we're getting, with more money coming in, value of things increases, meaning sponsorships will likely go up. The value of sponsorships and quantity will go up. More people will want to get involved. Hopefully player salaries go up. And more people are, you know, watching esports as a result of just all this momentum and all these people coming in. So my hope is that things will settle, and esports will continue to grow as a financial business and a financial industry. You know, the amount of all the money coming in is actually happening in a healthy and good way. So much so that we don't have to worry about like what happens when people start pulling out, because the investments will just be so sound. And I don't think that's good. I honestly don't think it's going to happen. I think there will probably be a little bit of shakeup. But again, like, what the great thing about esports is it is an industry that's built on the passion of fans and players, right? And it existed for 15 to 20 years before a lot of this investment money started coming in. So with that in mind, I think that passion will carry through, you know, hardship, whatever that looks like.
We always say if you don't have to be in esports, you're in the wrong industry. It's the same with theater. It's the same with television. It's the same with being a painter. Any of these type of industries where you don't do it just because it's a job. You do it because you feel like you have to do it. Like, I need to be in that industry, right? So there was a nice little cross, by the way. I'm going to use what you just said of between the bubble, the higher player salaries, the failures, like all these things led to the obvious of we got to mention Ember, right? So in that, you know, people will point to a single instance of this and make a bigger deal of it than maybe. I mean, it still matters, right? It matters that Ember failed, essentially. I mean, I don't know the inner workings, but if you have your investors pull out and you're no longer competing, then you failed, right? That's kind of the definition of failure. And so, though that doesn't like bode anything for the industry, in my opinion, or doesn't say like, oh, they're all going to fail, or investors are going to back out, or they're going to be more timid. It does remind us that it isn't just like a slam dunk, right? They don't just give you a bunch of money, you spend it however you do, and you walk away at the end of the day, and the industry's better off for it, right? Did Ember affect the industry in a positive way? I'm sure in some areas. I'm not sure where. I don't know that they've left an imprint that matters, though, is the thing, right? Did that money make a change that will alter the industry going forward? I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think one of the fundamental problems with the Ember model is, and I think with League of Legends in general right now, is that LCS spots, teams in the LCS, are worth much, 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 much more than their challenger predecessors, right? Or their challenger compatriots, right? Like
something I'm not unaware of.
right. So, and the value of that is much higher. So, teams, the business model is, I think, is broken in the sense of like Ember putting a ton of money into a challenger team with the hope of making it into the LCS, and then they don't, and then everyone pulls out, right? So that model, which might be necessary to get into the LCS, is super high risk, right? But
high reward too.
Yeah, exactly. So So was it good or bad for the industry? I'm not, it's hard for me to say. I think people saw what it takes. I think actually, in the sense, it might raise the value of LCS spots because people are seeing that, like, hey, you can't just buy a challenger team and then like put a bunch of money in and then try to make it in because you could fail and all that money could go away. In which case, let's just buy an LCS spot because and be willing to pay the millions of dollars or whatever it's inevitably going to be worth to get in.
And then
So I think
Europe at the same time didn't have any change, right? So you had them fail, and Europe, none of the challenger people got in. It's all the same roster again. So
right, exactly. I mean, which begs the question, like, at what point do you franchise if franchises or if teams are just going to be staying in? I know, yeah, just crossing your fingers waiting for that to happen. But yeah, so I don't necessarily think it was bad for the industry, but I think it taught the industry a lesson,
right.
In terms of why investments aren't everything and money isn't everything, right? Like you still need to have strong management, team direction. You need strong players. Talent is super important. Not to say their players were bad, but they weren't, I think a lot of people would say they weren't the top tier players. In fact, I think they got a lot of scrutiny because they built a team around Glebe, who is a support player and is decent, but not super great, at least in a lot of people's eyes. And I love Glebe. So yeah, I think it taught a valuable lesson to the industry to like, money isn't everything. You still need strong direction, strong leadership,
Yeah.
And strong talent as well.
I think that you're right. Maybe it taught us a lesson, and so that's good. I guess I was saying that I still think too. There's a point though where if money comes in and it's to be a success, it has to have done something. Like even if the company fails, if it did a positive thing in the industry, then the money was still good for that whole bubble thing we're talking about, right? It's only bad if it affects the bubble in a negative way, right? So if someone comes in and they like say prove a certain something's viable, I don't know, some certain type of product is viable, but they particular don't succeed, but other people do in there, that's still a good thing, right? Now there's new jobs, new revenue, and I believe in that. But if you come in and you just throw a bunch of money away, right? It's great. I think Thorne did it best. Thorne did a video on Ember, and he said, it's cool that these players now have money in their pockets. Like, you could say that was a good thing, right? Like, now these guys have cash in their pockets, but that's the only thing we can come out of it with, right? So, there's an interesting question from chat here. Context Zero asks, do you think if the bigger scenes games get more money and sponsors, we're talking about League of Legends here, obviously being one of the biggest, it will help aid the smaller ones or destroy them? And obviously that's a thing that affects you directly in your job, Nick. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, actually, I think it will help them. There's always going to be sponsors and brands that want to get in at different levels and at different price points, right? Coke, for example, probably has the budget to get in with League of Legends or some of these bigger guys, but like an endemic brand like Discord or maybe like Steel Series or some of these headphone sponsors, peripherals, whatever, they're not, as the amounts scale up, they're going to need to look to other channels and other ways to support and get in, because this demographic is super useful and vital to their success. And so, yeah, they'll go down to the next thing, right? And so in my mind, there's a little bit of I'm always hesitant to use this terminology, a little bit of a trickle down system where, like the top guys will be up at the top, and then like the smaller sponsors were sort of scaled down with smaller events. So I actually think it'll be good for the ecosystem as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about it sometimes as we've gotten up to that echelon now where we're getting sponsorship inquiries and stuff like that. It isn't just us chasing them, you get to that kind of, you cross over and we have a certain level we can take, right? Like at some point you can't either take certain amounts of money or you can't take certain categories because you're locked out of categories, or you literally just have no room in the jersey. Like we're going to be NASCAR pretty soon, right? Like my favorite example is Dignitas and Navi, how they've moved their logo to the side so they can have all this front page exposure basically on their jersey. But at some point we can't do NASCAR. We can't do 17 logos on the jersey, or maybe we can, I don't know. So there'll have to be trickle down solely because everyone wants in on this space, not just the investors but the sponsors. He asked about teams as well, and I think that what this also does is it allows teams to do to get into some of these smaller games. I use an example of an organization I like, which is Hearthlytics, and Hearthlytics is just a guy he really loves Hearthstone, so he started getting some Hearthstone players together. And what you'll see from them is most of their guys aren't famous, they don't have a lot of exposure, but they're really good. They finish top in the ladder and they play open tournaments. And then you get this guy Jab who actually makes it into the Americas, and starts getting invited to things. And so that Hearthlytics now has almost 5,000 Twitter followers, and that wasn't because he went out and got into League or got into Counter-Strike or whatever. Like, he went, I like Hearthstone, I have an ability to build here. They have a few sponsors I noticed recently, and I use them as an example because I've watched Hearthlytics growth over the last year, right? So there's room on all levels, I think, for those kind of opportunities. Would you agree with that?
I would absolutely agree. Yeah, it's just gonna, it scales all the way down. And it's funny too, like, and I think this is especially relevant for you, like local sponsors, right? We've talked a little bit about this.
Oh, yeah.
When do local sponsors start getting involved, right? We're thinking about these sort of like national, global, endemic, and non-endemic brands. Like, when does a local bank come up and like sponsor a small tournament? Like,
Yep.
It used to happen actually all the time back in the Smash Brothers days. I remember going to a tournament and a bank like was there on site with a table where you could sign up for like a student bank account and stuff, and they pay like help supplement the prize pool. So
Yep.
like the idea of sponsorships, is so broad, and we're only starting to scratch the surface of how they get involved.
And I actually saw both example of this in esports and out of what I think are really good reflections is going to Super Smash Con. Anybody that knows that event happened last August. It's going to be back for #2 this August. It was convention style, so they had some local, vendors there. People who were like, "Yeah, I'll pay for a booth," and that paying for a booth is like a mini sponsorship, right? And they're going to sell merch, they're going to make their money back, but now you're engaging local craftsmen. And here in Rochester, for those that don't know, we're in Western New York, where we are the esports org. It's not like in LA or Berlin or places like that where there's lots of other orgs. So we look at the opportunity here that Western New York is a good home base for us. And we have these events called we have a jazz festival here in the fall. We have a big thing called the Lilac Festival. We have a big festival called Park Ave Fest. All those kind of, you're a small city, you have your festivals. And the reason those festivals succeed is because you just said it. Every local bank, every local flower shop, every local craftsman buys a booth, puts their name on the brochure and pays, a few $100 for that. And they've set up a viable business model around this because these festivals come back year after year after year and bigger and better, right? And it's not this astronomical growth of esports, but it's a viable place in the ecosystem. And to think that there's no room for smaller teams or smaller organizations would kind of correlate back to small business not existing just because Starbucks and Walmart do, right?
Yep.
So,
Absolutely.
So kind of jumping back into, I want to talk a little bit more ecosystem stuff. We have a few more minutes. You guys are obviously getting more and more competition, right? We've got Google coming into the space. Azuba's always been there. Hitbox has always been there, etc. Yahoo did some broadcasting. That was a big thing. Everyone said, "Oh, look, Yahoo's broadcasting."
Yeah.
So we'll use the bank analogy, right? If more banks open up, I don't know that Chase or Citibank changes their strategy. Maybe they do, right? Like the bank ecosphere theoretically can have lots and lots of banks, but it seems like in streaming that doesn't seem to be the case, right? Like there seems to be a winner take all kind of mentality to a lot of people. Do you guys live and die by that strategy, or do you guys believe there's room for a lot of different products in this?
Well, we welcome competition. I think it keeps, just like in any industry, it keeps you on your toes, right? To a certain extent, you're only as good as your competition. I think, like, if you think about League of Legends and like the LCS, right? Like regions are ranked by sort of how good they are compared to their own region, right? Like, and that's why regions tend to be like almost holistically better than other regions in a lot of cases. So with that in mind, like, competition is welcome. I think the key thing for Twitch, and something that we continue to go back to is the community, right? Like,
Right.
There's a very engaging sort of warm feeling when you're on Twitch and you're part of the chat and you're getting to experience all that together. Now, even if you are like actively chatting, but if you're, you see like the memes and like the crazy stuff around the side, like it gives you like a deeper level of connection that I think you can't really replicate anywhere else. So with that in mind, like, we continue to innovate, we continue to add features and things to help the platform be as unique and as progressive as possible. And in addition to that, like that community feel, that broadcaster feel, getting to engage on that level with a ton of different people, sort of the roar of the crowd element that is involved with being in Twitch chat. Those are all things that I think are irreplaceable and that continue to help us grow and be the leader in like social video in the space.
As a Twitch fanboy, I'll call myself. I still look back to the day when I really. This is a example of how you guys set yourself apart. If you guys haven't seen the tweet reply that Twitch gave to YouTube when they came out, YouTube Gaming said, "Hey, we're coming out," and Twitch replied, "Welcome player to add me on Google Plus Kappa." And there was so many levels of wrecked in that tweet. Like it was like level upon level upon level. We have our own language. You tried this before. We're here to stay. Like there were just so many levels, and I love it. And that community goes back to the fact there's its own language. I describe this to people sometimes who don't know esports. I'm like, you go on Twitch and you won't understand why we speak a different language. We do, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
no, that's great. I like that idea, and I think I like to speak to the tech industry sometimes on this podcast. Because I think there's some other great tech innovators out there like Splyce that are doing interesting products for esports. You should always want to look at what your competition's doing and outdo them. And if you're not, then your product's not going to succeed. And B, if you don't have competition, maybe you don't have a real product, right? Like if no one else is trying to do it, then maybe it's not a viable product. So we're glad there's other people out there trying to do the same thing as us because it gives us some kind of sign that people see value in it, right? So.
Yep.
We have a couple of, we'll let people ask, I always at the end let people ask kind of if they have any silly, interesting questions to do. But before we do that, I like to let people do their plugs. So aside from the fact that we've shamelessly plugged Twitch a million times already, you want to plug any of the projects you're working on, like eSports and Chill?
Yeah, definitely not that. That show is terrible. So we've had a couple of announcements in the past few weeks. One is we're doing a partnership with Super Evil Megacorp around Vainglory, which is a mobile esport.
Love that game.
Yeah, I mean the game is really, really good. And people are skeptical, and with anything, and just like esports, I've spent a lot of time sort of advocating for it. I would just say like, hey, if you just check it out. It's an interesting game, and it has a very strong community. It's growing really quick. In addition to that, too, like we're also partnering with Psyonix around Rocket League. And Rocket League, I think everyone knows how crazy that game is and how much potential it has. So just keep an eye out for sort of like the Twitch esports related partnerships that we're doing. They're all very promising, and I think that would be my shameless plug.
All right. Well, I'll do my shameless plug here and say make sure you check out splyce.gg. We have all the best broadcast listings out there, most comprehensive, we like to say. If you want to know what's on, you'll find it there. We also have a great topic section, which does house esports and chill, which he shamelessly hates and says this is terrible. But we try to have the best opinion-based commentary on the industry out there. Some big writers like Thorn, Lurpus, EG and Control, Red Eye, etc. all write for us. And then also our pro team. We're at Splyce Pro and Splyce GG on social media, depending on if you care about our pro team or if you just like our tech product, but hopefully both. So now we'll ask take a couple chat questions here. Some are more serious. Someone actually asked about Rocket League, which I think is a great one. It says, Nick, you were commenting about the championship series they're starting. You seem pretty excited about that. And so why and how much involvement do you have? It's a good question, right? Like why Rocket League and how heavily are you guys going in at Twitch?
Yeah, Rocket League, I mean, why Rocket League the game is super accessible, right? Like, it's funny how often Rocket League plays make it at the top of, like, Reddit all. And I know that not that many people are, like, watching it and, like, enjoying it, they'll enjoy these plays, right? So when you watch Rocket League, you immediately understand what's going on. And that level of accessibility hasn't really come with, like, a game yet, right? Like,
right.
And it's different than, like, Madden and NBA, like, and, like, the basketball games. Like, they're good and they're relatable to the actual sport, but they're like almost too relatable where Rocket League differentiates itself in that capacity. And so I think that's why it's super interesting. A lot of people play it. And then in terms of what our partnership is all about, it's truly a partnership between our two organizations to help build out the competitive ecosystem around Rocket League, right? So they have staff dedicated, we have staff dedicated, we both have resources dedicated to the partnership to grow and expand this thing, because we just want them set up for success. And so going back to what we were talking about earlier, my job is really to help promote healthy, long-standing ecosystem development around games, and we're partnered with Psyonix to do that. And you'll see more announcements coming out soon. You can check out RocketLeagueEsports.com. It should be really fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you mentioned the corollary to Madden or NBA. I think that's a perfect thing to say, like, yes, it's the same as basketball, but you also have to know basketball to watch NBA, right? Yeah. Where you don't have to know a damn thing to watch Rocket League. Cars drive around, hit a ball into a net, the end, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I was talking to... Oh, I'm going to forget who it was. Somebody along my trip. I was at the major last week, as we mentioned, and Splyce made the major. It was really exciting. But
Yeah.
what was interesting is talking to people like my cab driver. I was talking to my cab driver, I think it was, or my Uber driver, I should say. And we were on our way somewhere, and we were talking about Counter-Strike and why Counter-Strike works. And it's like, Counter-Strike works because it's literally like five guys try and shoot five other guys. If none of them are alive on one team, the other team usually wins 98% of the time, except the rare
Right.
circumstances when the bomb, that whole thing, right?
Yeah.
But like it's there's a beauty in that simplicity and then the complexity of the strategy behind the game, which is very much the opposite of games like World of Warcraft, League of Legends, Hearthstone, which have incredible amounts of complexity built right
Yep.
in to the viewer experience. I mean, that's some people say that's why Warcraft can never grow, is because if you haven't played a lot of Warcraft, you just literally can't follow along at all, right? People are just
Yep.
pixelating on top of each other. That's all you see.
Yeah.
So I think that's an interesting case. Is I don't particularly have a care towards Rocket League. I don't like or hate it. I just don't, it's not my game, But I could see why, if I passed by it and I didn't know esports, I might go, "What is this thing?" And maybe I'll watch it. Right? That's
Yeah.
kind of what it sounds like you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's again, yeah, it is accessible, and it's just like the highlight reels, like it's just so interesting. Like I don't watch traditional sports, honestly. But I'll watch some like ESPN highlights, like the top 10 plays, right? And Rocket League to a certain extent is made for that type of sort of exposure.
Right.
And yeah, it's super compelling and fun to watch. So you're just really excited.
I think that there's a. You mentioned the top 10 plays, and I was just thinking, like, imagine if they're trying to, like, mix things in, like ESPN's been doing lately. Imagine they, like, mixed in, like, and this sick pentakill, and you're like, I don't know what's happening here, right? Like, if you've never seen League of Legends, you literally couldn't watch that. You just have no clue. But a Rocket League goal, I think you could kind of figure out what's going on, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Um, so shout out to Actors26 who says today is my 27th birthday. So throw a little shout out there in
Shout
chat.
out. I,
Any more? Last thing. Machine says you aren't wrong. Esports and Chill is literally the worst show on Twitch, Kappa. So if you're looking for something really terrible to watch, Nick Allen, Kelly May, and oh, why am I blanking right now? Who's your third person?
Travis Gafford.
Travis. I can
Travis.
see his picture. Like I can see his face. I'm like, what, yeah, the Travis Gafford. Right, you have to put the in front of it. Monday nights at it's Mondays,
8
right?
p.m. So it'll be tonight at 8 p.m. Yeah,
8 p.m.
or Monday.
Pacific, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So 11 p.m.
Great.
Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific. If you're in Europe, clearly Nick Allen doesn't care about you because he's put in a
Yep.
time that you cannot
Right.
watch.
Yep.
So confirmed. Nick
Yep.
Allen and Kelly May, they just don't care about Europe. So
True.
um, let's see. Any more questions from chat? Do you think that Oh, this is a great one because I actually asked this. I actually talk about this a lot. Do you think that CS:GO can rise to that level, like that top level, or is it gonna? Is it? I mean, there's a lot of factors here, right? Because of the fact that it is free, like Valve says you can do whatever you want. Is that good or bad? And the fact that there's so many people play it, that it's so accessible to watch. We have all these things that allow us to say that it could really succeed because of it, or maybe it does hit a plateau. I mean, Twitch obviously looks at every esport, even the big ones. So where do you guys see the growth of Counter-Strike? Oh, did I lose Nick?
No, it's me. I'm here. Ha, ha.
I was like, that was really like mime
I
going on
see.
there.
It's interesting. So if you look at this past weekend, right, the major viewership for CS:GO had some serious numbers, and the LCS playoffs were pretty far behind. I think it was almost like half. Um, so what that indicates to me is that there is potential, right? I mean, it's not exactly an apples to apples comparison because it's like the major, they happen a few times a year versus like consistent play that happens with the LCS. But we're seeing a glimpse into what CS:GO could potentially be viewership wise. Now, one of the things that League of Legends has going for it is that, these live studio events where the players are on site and it's very curated. And CS:GO has never had that sort of consistent type of experience. But I would say if it did, and it had 4 years of growth behind it in the same way that, the LCS has, which started in 2013, so this is the fourth season, it could be there too. So yes, I think CS:GO is could be as big, if potentially not bigger, than League of Legends in the West at least. Hard to say, but they have a lot of things. They're not doing a lot of things that League of Legends does. So, given that they do everything the same with live studio, 4 years of build up, all that different stuff. I imagine you'd see CS:GO in a similar place.
It's interesting because I've actually said to many people that I see that 2016 being the year we end where League of Legends is no longer 100% on top. And I don't mean that in terms of like the LCS itself compared to something else, but the fact that my League of Legends players right now are just at home, right? Like they're at home, they're playing some League of Legends. Like there's nothing for them to do that in the public eye, it's only going to be practice and getting better, which is still great. However, my Counter-Strike guys literally finished the major, and now they're getting prepped for the Face It League qualifiers. And then after that, they're going to have a Pro League game in one league. Then they're going to have to come back and do CEVO, and it's like it never stops. And there's some bad sides to that. There absolutely is. Like there's no off season, which is really rough, right? If you want to incorporate a new member, look at like what Team Liquid just went through, right? Team Liquid had to take a player they cut to the major. He plays exceptionally well. Now there's this weird thing where like Adren isn't even really on the team anymore, right? Like that is Kusta's slot, and it's because there's no off season to make that change. They just did it, right?
Yeah.
But I think that just the fact that there's that to me makes it really feel like there's opportunity this year because what happens in September for most teams? They do nothing in League of Legends till January, like nothing. Only a small percentage go on to do stuff for September, October, November. And whereas Counter Strike, we just don't stop playing.
Yep.
So
Which is tough, right? Like I think off seasons are important for fans to miss the game. Like
that's
it's not
true.
around.
That's true.
And it's also important for players to like get a break and that sort of thing, right? So yeah, it's rough. And I think like the off season for League of Legends has just enough events to keep people sort of engaged, but gives players a break. So it gives again, time for fans to miss the game.
The miss the game effect is something that's really important that I hadn't thought of. That I think that if you look at traditional sports, baseball does pretty poorly, and I think the NBA does really well, despite having similar size seasons. Is that it just feels like baseball? Maybe just because I don't like baseball. I might be biased. I'm going to throw that in there. But baseball doesn't feel like it ever really goes away. And the NBA, you really see these guys taking their break from the NBA. You kind of miss the fact that they're not playing ball anymore. You have just enough to whet the appetite with the trade season and with
Yeah.
draft. But otherwise, you see these guys in their life. They're lifting weights and they're playing cards with their friends. And you're like, I wish you were playing basketball right now. I'm a big basketball fan, right? And then when opening day happens, there's more hype behind it. And maybe again, maybe it's terrible to say baseball because I bet other people would say, it's just like that for baseball. But
Yeah.
I do agree that Counter Strike doesn't have that. Oh my God, it's almost Counter Strike season, right? And LCS definitely has that. So. All right, well, folks, as everyone knows who watches the show, I like to be very on time and cognizant of people's time, so we keep this to an hour. I'd like to thank my guest, Nick Allen from Twitch, the dank memer himself, for being here with me to talk about esports. If you want to catch more of this, we're here every Monday, 2 p.m. Eastern. Go ahead and give the channel a follow. Check out splyce.gg. I'd say check out Twitch, but you're on it right now, so I don't need to. Give us follows on Twitter, Facebook. We're really active there. We got lots of cool, neat stuff. Until then, we'll see you next week, and thanks for stopping by.